Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Through the Fire. I am your host, Ryan Wickline, and today we are joined by a very special guest. He is a business transformation author, Mr. Todd Hagopian. How you doing today, Todd?
Very good. Thank you so much for having me, Ryan.
Hey, it is my pleasure. Like I was telling you in the pre-interview, I kind of understand your background and where you came from a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, the number one question the audience is probably wondering, who is Todd Hagopian?
Sure. Yeah. So I am a business transformation expert. I get dropped into bad companies, figure out how to turn them around, and then usually get moved into another company that needs to turn around. So that's what I've been doing for the last 10, 15 years, 20 years. Um, but now I'm a business transformation author as well. So I've got a story to tell and kind of gone through a lot of adversity over the years and have started to basically come up with my own toolbox activities that I think I can teach other people how to think differently for breakthrough results.
Yeah. What was your life like before you were diagnosed with bipolar
Yeah.
disorder?
Yeah, so and that's really the story, right? So for 15 years I was undiagnosed, and so essentially I would have these great business kind of. I was moving up in the business world, doing good things, getting promoted, having big wins, and then every time I had a big win, something bad would happen, right? Just kind of like fall off a cliff. Um, it's a lot of self sabotage and that kind of thing. And I always chalked it up to the traditional work hard, play hard kind of thing. I work real hard and then I would play too hard and get myself into trouble, and this and that. And it's just kind of things that guys do. But eventually, and I'm talking like 22 hours a day, like I would only sleep a couple hours a day for years and years and years. Um, Drinking, a quart or more every night and that kind of thing. Like it was bad. A lot of self medication because I didn't know that something was wrong. You know what I mean? I needed to do something to quiet down the activity in my brain and that kind of thing. And then eventually you get old, right? And so you turn mid 30s. You can't go 22 hours a day anymore. You can't drink as much as I was drinking and still be good the next day and that kind of thing. And so I kind of hit a cliff and it turned real bad. And I finally went in and actually I went in with heart pain, chest pain and headaches. And they kind of threw the book at it, tried to figure out what was going on. And somebody finally goes, "Have you ever talked to a psychiatrist?" And I was like, "Well, that's a weird question. Like my chest is hurting, my head's hurting. Why would I talk to a psychiatrist? And and pretty quickly in that conversation, it was, yeah, you're like really bipolar. and then and then a couple more psychiatrists said the same thing. So I finally started to listen, and then I had to decide what to do from there, and that's where kind of the story begins. But yeah, the 15 years before I was diagnosed, it was I didn't really know anything was wrong. I just thought that was kind of the way it is in business when you're flying high and having a lot of fun on the side. So
Man, that is just crazy to me because how were you able to function at such a high level for 15 years before you were diagnosed?
yeah, I mean it was you when I would get into these hypomanics, not everyone knows what bipolar is, right? So probably take a minute there. Like it's not just bad temper and that kind of thing. Like I always tell people that has nothing to do with it. I'm just a jerk. You know what I mean? Like the bipolar is kind of this hypomanic period where you have all kinds of energy and you're just going full throttle and going in 100 different directions and staying up all night and real goal directed activity and grandiose thinking and that kind of thing. And then you have the bipolar depression where you just kind of fall off the cliff. And obviously, bipolar has like 20 times the suicide rate and that kind of thing. And it gets real bad. But the real part that gets bad is when you are flying high, commit to all this stuff, and then you hit the depression, right? And now you're like, how the heck am I going to deliver this, right? So I mean, my trick really was just I am lucky enough to have probably 80 to 90% of my time spent up in the hypomanic area, and that actually helps you in business. You know what I mean? So I was able
Yeah.
to dive in and do more. And instead of spending 12 hours a day doing all kinds of weird stuff, I would just spend more time working, and that helped me go up the ladder. And then I'd get myself in trouble when I fell off the cliff. But I mean, that's kind of how I got there. And frankly, I moved jobs a lot. You know what I mean? Like I would be in a job for a couple of years. Even when I was at Whirlpool for 6 years, they would move me around to different positions. So something was always new and it was always keeping my attention. And that helped me, probably go that long without anybody really figuring out that something was wrong. I mean, we're talking, I got married, I had kids, like they didn't even know, because real early on, I got arrested a couple of times for drinking. So real early on, I learned that I needed to drink at home. And then when
Yeah.
I got married, it was like, can't drink in front of them. So I'll just wait till they go to bed. And then I got several hours, after that before you run into 2 hours of sleep. So really people didn't know what was going on, even the people closest to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. How did the alcohol come into play? Because I know personally, because like I've told you before, I had a friend that was bipolar that I grew up with and lived with for a while. How did the alcohol affect you?
Yeah, I mean it's not good. So the alcohol was a huge trigger for me. When I got drunk, that was when the bad things started to happen. And just in general, like you're not sleeping, right? So if I start drinking at 9 or 10, and then I'm still drinking at 3 or 4, you're going to have had a lot of alcohol, and you're going to start making bad decisions. So it was definitely bad. But the whole point of the alcohol, I thought, or what I told myself, was to calm myself down, kind of bring me down so that I could sleep. Of course, alcohol doesn't help you sleep, right? Unless you pass out, like it
Yeah.
doesn't help you sleep. So it was really a bad deal all around for me. And I mean, I drank a lot. It was a bad problem for a long time. And I literally, when I got diagnosed, that was what they told me. Is they said, you got to start sleeping and you got to quit drinking. And I quit that day. Not that day, but as soon as I realized I was going to take it seriously, that's when I quit. So I've been sober for about 9 years now. Um, and that has helped tremendously. I still only sleep probably 4 or 5 hours a night, but it's better than two. And now I don't have the drinking that causes the bipolar depression. I mean, you can go in these manic type episodes, and I've never been diagnosed bipolar 1, which is like where you actually have diagnosed manic episodes, but you can go a week or two without really remembering what's going on. And that gets much worse if you're drinking. So I mean, it was not a good deal.
Well, congratulations for
Yeah.
quitting drinking.
Yeah.
What is the hot system and how did you create it?
Yeah, so when I got on the medicine, I like to tell this story this way. When I got on the medicine, and finally decided to attack this disorder, it worked really, really well. Like the medicine that I was on, essentially an antipsychotic, right? And it took the hypomania out, and it took the bipolar depression out, and it just kind of leveled me out completely. The problem with that is I lost the hypomania, right? So that was what I was known for. Now people didn't know why, but they knew me as that guy who had boundless energies and thought outside the box and could work 10 hours in a row on something and come up with an answer, set a big goal and knock it out. And so when it went away, I was like, man, I instantly went from like Tony Stark to Tony Stagnant. It was bad. It was not good, and it was noticeable, right? But people didn't know about the bipolar. Remember, I kept that quiet, but they could tell that something was different, and so I had to think about it. Like, and this is why a lot of people that are bipolar go back on off the meds, right? Because they lose something that they were used to having. And I had to think, like, do I want to be healthy or do I want to be successful? Sanity or successful. And that was not a cool decision. And so I finally said, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to hack my brain a little bit. I'm going to weaponize my wiring and come up with a couple of things that I can systematize to make myself manage like I used to. And so I did that, and I kind of bottled up a couple of things, did one turnaround, went to another turnaround, bottled up a couple different things for that one. And then by the third turnaround, at about the 13th month, I was like, oh, I forgot to do that one thing from before. I should have done that. And I did it, and it worked. And that's when I was like, you know what? I got to write these down. Like I got to completely really systematize this so that I can continue managing in a hypomanic way while staying healthy and not actually having the hypomania, but reminding myself how I used to do it. And that's how the hot system came about. It's a series of systematized tools to make you think outside the box and make you think differently. Because frankly, like, we can all look at these books behind me, right? We all have read the same 20 books. But if we all manage that way, we're going to manage our companies the exact same. You're not going to get ahead of your competition. Like, the way you get breakthrough results is by thinking differently. And so that's what the hot system is basically a systematized way to use hypomanic thinking and hypomanic management skills.
Huh. Why did you decide to write your first book in business fiction format?
Yeah, a lot of people ask that. The reasoning is because my favorite book is business fiction, and so The Goal by Eliyahu Goldratt is a famous business fiction book, and essentially it tells a story of a guy turning around a business, right? And it's so easy to think back and be like, remember that one scene where they were doing continuous improvement and blah blah blah, and then he told this story, and it's easy to go back and grab. Whereas all these books behind me, you have to think, like, which book was that had this one strategy? Oh, maybe it was this book. Then you got to go through 30 chapters and try and find that one strategy and the 2 pages in that chapter that had to do with the thing you're looking for. It's gotten a little easier with AI, but it's still pretty hard to go and grab that thing. And so business fiction to me was just a cool way to tell the story about how bipolar thinking can actually turn around a business. Now, I do have a 3-book deal. So the next 2 books are nonfiction, and they go deep into the actual strategies. But this first book just illustrates it really well so that people can see how it works. Like, you'll read this book, and if you're in business, you'll be like, I've had that exact same conversation, and we never fixed it that way. And that's the point of this book, is like the exact same conversation they're having in their boardroom, you've had in yours, but this is the different way to fix it. And so in the business fiction book, the bipolar billionaire who's acting as a mentor to somebody without bipolar, because this book is written for people without bipolar, you're supposed to be able to implement this regardless of whether you have it or not, because you can think differently. And so the mentor is teaching them how to think differently. And so you'll be able to go back and use that scene and be like, that's how we need to handle this over here. And that's why I wrote it that way.
Huh. It's kind of interesting there how you made it just easier for somebody to understand that way.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Because, if I just go to somebody and be like, what you should do, you should manage your business like you have bipolar. People are like, that sounds like a terrible idea. You know what I mean? but if they read through a book and they're like, man, I recognized all 9 of those scenes. Like, I've literally been in those conversations, and all 9 times they came up with a different way of thinking that drove completely differentiated results. And by the way, it's all in a real setting. So you can see, like, people can read that book and be like, that would never happen, but they won't, because I've been in those conversations for the last 25 years. I know exactly what happens in those conversations. And by the way, the bipolar inspired conversations that are in there are literally from real life. So I know they work. You know what I mean? And you're gonna too. Like, when you read it, you'll recognize that, yes, that way of thinking would have driven a different result than what I did in that same situation.
What's the name of your first book?
Yeah, so The Unfair Advantage, Weaponizing the Hypomanic Toolbox, that is on Amazon right now, pre-order, and it'll launch in January, but you can pre-order it now. So The Unfair Advantage by Todd Hagopian.
Nice.
Yep.
How is the hot system different than other leadership books out there?
Yeah, so the best way to think about the difference is the amount of, probably the right word is aggressive, and then also focus. So essentially, a lot of the things I talk about are things that other business authors and business consultants have talked about, like the 80-20 system, and productivity metrics and things like that. But the hot system is all about taking it to the next level and really, really focusing your time and energy on the things that only you can do. and it allows you to become much more productive. So, for example, like the Karelin method, everyone talks about activity times efficiency equals results, right? It's real easy for me to tell you as an employee, you should work more hours and you should get better at your job, right? So, activity, hours, efficiency, get better at your job. And if you get 20% more hours and 20% better at your job, you're going to get 44% better results. So thank you. You're welcome. Like that's, okay. That's what most managers do. What the hot system does is it breaks it into one more segment. So it's activity times efficiency times focus. Not only that, but the activity is the minimal part, the efficiency. Instead of just getting better at your job, we preach systematizing, automating, outsourcing, or killing tasks that are not driving profit per minute. So you're maximizing your profit per minute. Then you take that a step further and you go to focus. And what focus is all about is going back to what I just said, spend as many minutes a day doing things that only you can do, right? I know how to do operations, but it's not effective if I'm doing the operations in the company. Like I need to be up here doing the strategy. I need to be cutting deals. I need to be coming up with partnerships, and I need my ops guy to do the operations. So what I tell people is take a look at your calendar. You got 100 things you're doing that week. How many hours a day are you spending on the top 5 that only you can do? And the truth is, everyone thinks that it's a lot, but when you do that math and you look at your calendar, you'll find out that it's not. There's not very many hours a week that you're actually doing spending what only you can do. And so the Karelin method is about focusing your time and spending all 40 hours on the 5 things that only you can do. And so when you say, I'm 20% working 20% harder, I'm 20% better, not from getting better at my job, but from automating, systematizing, outsourcing. And then I'm 500% more productive because instead of 5 hours a week on that stuff, on those top 5, I'm spending all 40 hours a week on it. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, the productivity level in the organization just completely changes. Now think about a 150-person organization where you've got everybody spending 40 hours a week on the stuff only they can do. And it just explodes. And that's the idea behind, that's kind of like an example of how the hot system is different. It's like everyone says, don't spend time on dumb stuff, right? But nobody has a system to figure it out. And that's what we do in our organization and what I've done in 4 different turnarounds so far.
Nice. Yeah, I think you kind of hit on that too, because like everybody, not even just in like the business world, like in personal life, spend time on dumb stuff that they don't need to do.
Yep.
That is like killing their, and everybody's like, well, I don't have enough time. Well, you're wasting it on things that are ineffective.
Yep. I always tell people your employees are not complaining because they had to work an extra hour. They're complaining because they had to work an extra hour after they wasted 2 hours on some stupid crap in the middle of the day that they wish they hadn't had to do. Now, when employees feel like everything they're doing is adding value and they can connect it to the goal of the organization, and they feel like they're helping their peers and they're helping the company and they're helping their bonus, then employees are willing to work that extra hour and not complain about it. And it's not like you're working them to death. I'm just saying, like, that's when you get true employee engagement because they believe that they're there for a reason. They're driving the result that they want and they feel good about what they're doing and they don't feel like they lost an hour of family time because so-and-so put them on this stupid committee that they don't even talk during the meeting, but they have to sit there for 2 hours.
Yeah. That's what a lot of it is. I think wasted time, and then like doing things that you feel uninspired doing.
Yep. 100%.
That you don't feel like your true calling.
Yep, 100%. And that's where this extreme focus comes in. And we used to even have a rule at Whirlpool that we'd say, if the meeting wasn't valuable, walk out. You know what I mean? Just get out. And I can't tell you, most people would not use that rule. I would walk right out. Sorry, I got better things to do. Like this was before I even knew, I was bipolar and before we had the official. But again, it's like, that's what we did is I then systematized these things that I used to do when I was hypomanic. Everyone else was too scared to walk out. And I'd be like, man, we've been in here 12 minutes. It's clear no decisions are going to be made today. I haven't said one word. Bye. you know, and so, but if you have 150 people who care about every minute of the day, you are going to get a lot more done.
Yeah. Yeah. I see it a lot of times too, just in every sort of business where there's so much time wasted. Everybody wants to have meetings. Let's talk. It's like nothing's getting done here.
Yep.
It's like you're just wasting time.
Yep. I always say no meeting. I said this just the other day in a town hall. I said no more meetings about meetings, no more updates about updates, no more planning about planning. I said every meeting has to have a decision in it. said, I said, cancel a meeting today, shorten a meeting today, reduce the attendees in the meeting today. I don't care, but every meeting has to have a decision in it, and every person in the meeting has to talk. Because if those two things aren't happening, then you're wasting somebody's time.
Yeah.
So
Completely agreed. You have executed this in Fortune 500 companies. Does this work in small businesses as well?
yeah, so I bought a small business during COVID, actually. So during COVID, I put all my money into a small business, manufacturing business, bought a family company, and we turned that around too. So it was actually, I had gotten fired during COVID because everyone was getting fired during the beginning of COVID when we all thought it was going to be real bad. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do all this and see if it works inside. At that time, I knew I was bipolar. I was like, I'm just going to go and do this myself and see if I can make me $1 million instead of somebody else $1 million, And I bought a company and we turned it around and doubled the company in 3.5 years. And I sold it for a nice double profit. And it worked like a charm. It was exactly as intended. So I actually went in there, worked 50 hours a week, and then worked myself down to 10 because I systematized everything. And then they didn't need me anymore, so I was able to sell it. So, yeah, it works. It's now, when you're in a small company, you got to roll up your sleeves and you're down in the weeds a lot more and that kind of stuff. So it's even more important that you make sure that you're spending your time right. But you do have to do a lot more of the other stuff. Like when you don't have 150 people, you're going to have to do a lot of the extra stuff, but you do have to just be very protective of your time and outsource where appropriate. A lot of small companies think that they don't have time or money to outsource, but the reality is it's almost more important in those companies because you have such limited resources, and the stuff that you're spending your time on, website and writing and emailing and tracking, like all this stuff costs almost nothing to outsource. But people are so scared of it because it's $100 a month or $200 an hour, and this and that, and they think they can't do it. But I just embraced outsourcing and really got our small team, to focus on what only us could do, and we drove some pretty incredible results pretty quickly.
Nice.
Yeah.
If people could implement just one thing from the HOT system, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, that Karelin method is real powerful. I will say that that's one of the most powerful parts of the HOT system. But the other one that I would focus on is the 80/20 matrix of profitability. And what this means is treating your customers and products differently. Okay, so you really take a look at all the products you have and all the customers you have, and then all the product customer combinations, and figure out what you want to be when you grow up, right? And if you label all the customers top to bottom, revenue all the way down to zero, and products top to bottom, revenue all the way down to zero, and then you look at where 80% of your products revenue comes from and 80% of your customer revenue comes from, there's this quadrant that's made of your A customers and your A products. And that quadrant will be about this big in this huge grid, right? But it will drive about 64 to 80% of your profit. And so the point of that is you can cut out 90% of your business and keep 80% of your profit. And if you cut out 90% of the rest of the noise and invested all that time and energy back into the things that you do really good that make you the most money, that's how you double your business. And so I'm not preaching there's a lot more to the 80/20 matrix of profitability. You don't just cut everything, but there are different things that you do in each quadrant. So you might outsource up here. You might do different deals down here, and then you cut this huge B product, B customer category that really drives so much complexity that it costs you time and money, and you're basically paying people to take your product. So that 80/20 matrix of profitability, a lot of people talk about 80/20 and they think they're implementing 80/20 in their business, But in reality, there's only a handful of companies in the country that really know how to implement true 80-20 leadership. And the matrix I've come up with is really takes it to the next level again. And we go 80-20 squared. And it's basically the top 4% of your customer product combinations drive 64% of your profits. And it's all about trying to eliminate or outsource everything else so you can drive all of your effort into that top 4% again. So it's tied to the Karelin method, but those two things together are extremely profitable if implemented correctly.
Nice. What has been your biggest challenge in writing your books?
Yeah, I mean, I think the putting it in fiction was tough just because, you know, I'm not a fiction writer, right? So it took some time to figure that out. I had to go through the editing process. You get a lot of people that are like, that's impossible. And you're like, actually, it's not. I did it 3 times. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. You just get random opinions from people who haven't done it. And so it makes you mad, that like, yes, it is possible. I literally had that exact conversation. That exact thing happened. But so like that's tough. And then you get reviews and people are like, oh, you should have done nonfiction. And you're like, yeah, I am doing nonfiction. I just did this first. And so those are probably the hardest parts, is that everyone's got an opinion, and it's great. I love talking about it now, but at the beginning that was pretty hard. You spend all your time and then realize like, oh yeah, I'm not a fiction writer. Like there definitely were, things that I could have done with that character that would have made him more engaging and this and that. And then you have to change it and go through the edits, and, it all worked out well. But I think that was a hard lesson to learn, like that it wasn't just I'm good at business, so it falls onto the book, you had to actually learn the different parts of a story and how you have to build to this, and then, have a twist, and that was tough. Yeah.
Yeah. What's been the most rewarding part for you then?
Yeah, I mean, the most rewarding part, honestly, is getting to talk about these strategies. So for 8 years, I was bipolar and told nobody, and I just was implementing these, and I was teaching my lieutenants and my directors to do this, but they didn't know why, and it was hard to explain, like, where did you get this from? It's not like I could point to a book. It's not like, it's just I've done this before, so we're going to do it again. Now it's really cool to be able to be like, okay, it has a name. This is where it's from, and this is why it works. You know what I mean? And I'm challenging people to think differently and embrace that about the neurodivergent thinking rather than be worried about it. So that's the most fun part, is actually putting a name to some of these things, telling people how I came up with it, why I came up with it, why it's different. Because people are like, before they knew, they were like, this is way different than anything I've heard before. Like, how do I know it works? Well, now that it's worked 4 times, it's a lot easier to tell that story. But also now I can point to chapter 5. I can point to these 6 articles I've written about it, and it helps people visualize, and think that it's a real thing. And so getting to do these podcasts and write the articles, that's probably the most fun part.
Yeah. Awesome. When are the other 2 scheduled to be released?
Yep. So January for the first one, July for the second one, July of 26, and then January of 27. The July of 26 one's pretty much written, and the January of 27 one I'm just getting into now. So.
Oh man, so you're having to stay kind of committed and everything to make sure you get done.
Yeah, well, it's cool. Like at first I was self-publishing the first book, and then I had a publisher come in and say, I want to do this with you. And I said, I'll do it if you do 3. And the reason for that, I'm bipolar, so it's like I want to do bigger than everybody else, right? And then B, it was like, okay, if I'm really going to put this much time and energy into it, I want something where everything I do kind of pays back 3 times. So similar Karelin methodology, right? So you're not going to find me like tweeting a ton. You're going to find me doing podcasts and web stuff that lives on and on and on, and then we'll hit all 3 launches. You know what I mean? So I kind of decided that I was going to make this a big thing, and I was gonna basically spend 15 months launching 3 books together and let them feed into each other, and that was a lot of fun. That's been a pretty cool reward out of all this, because most people publish a book, they sell 85 copies, and then they're done, and they never do it again. And I wanted my experience to be different than that.
Awesome. What has been your favorite turnaround season?
Yeah. I mean, I really, really liked when I was at ITW and we were turning around a scale business, just a grocery store scale business. It was a really cool turnaround because they actually had the product already that they needed, but they didn't know it, and we kind of stumbled into it, and so we were doing this tear down and trying to figure out how to take cost out of this product, and I came upon the load cell, which is how precise something weighs. And they were like, yeah, we could take $15 out of that. And I said, well, why are we paying $15 to begin with? And they said, well, it'll weigh a third decimal point. And I said, well, walk me through that. Why would somebody want that? And they were like, well, theoretically you can charge more money because instead of 10.1 pounds, it's 10.15 pounds. And I said, well, theoretically, that's really awesome. Like why wouldn't we be talking about that? Like, so you're saying that every time somebody goes and buys meat, they're going to make 6 more cents? And they're like, yeah, that's basically it. And I'm like, all right. So it's like a bad 80s movie where every single person that comes in, you're going to make 6 extra cents. And they're like, yeah. And so we started doing the math out, and it turned out they could pay for the scale in months. You know what I mean? And so we used to sell scales when they broke. A scale would break, somebody would buy a scale from us for $3,000. And instead I was able to go to people and be like, this is the math, and this is what you need to do. You need to replace all 3,000 scales right now and cut me a $900,000 check or a $6 million check or whatever it is, and then you will make your money back in 4.5 months. And after that, it's pure profit. And we completely changed the industry. Went from 40 million to 70 million in sales in just a year and a half. You know what I mean? Completely changed our profit profile. The actual scale never changed. It was the exact same as it was when I walked in the door. It was just about thinking differently. And instead of saving $15 and taking that load cell out and putting something cheaper in, we used the load cell, turned it into a go-to-market strategy, and completely changed the company.
Yeah, and it seems like you made it a lot clearer too, the message of the why.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the engineers had the right idea. They were like, people will value having better precise weighing. And they even knew why, because it would make them more money. The problem is that never translated. So the marketing guys were never talking about that. The sales guys were never talking about that. Nobody ever understood it, and more importantly, nobody ever put it into a math problem. So once we articulated that message, they sold themselves. I mean, it was then my job went from marketing it to figuring out how to produce twice as many. Right. That completely changed the job. All of a sudden I was an operations guy just trying to figure out how to double my capacity, and that's a lot more fun than trying to figure out how to take cost out and relaunch a product and do that kind of stuff. So,
yeah. What's your favorite part about turnaround management?
There's no good part about turnaround management except the last day when it's done. So turnaround management sucks. But what I do like coming in and thinking differently. Like there's so much, we talk about stagnation a lot. You've got innovation stops and your good people start leaving and your competition starts eating your lunch and all this stuff happens on your way down. And once you get to the bottom, it's like, all right, finally people are ready to change because they realize it. So I guess my favorite part about turnaround management versus catching it on the way down where people still think they're okay is once you get to the turnaround, everyone's like, crap. Like we need to fix this, and so it's a lot easier to get people on board to make dramatic changes faster, which sometimes you can't do when the business is doing okay. You know what I mean? So I think if I had one thing to like about turnaround management, it's that, especially when you get hired in as the turnaround guy, like they're usually bringing you in knowing and dictating that you make changes fast, and that suits my style really well. So I like that part of it.
So probably don't. How many times you face a lot of like what do you call it, like adversity and like people coming against what you're
Oh yeah, you for sure. As you go down the org, you face that all the time because still, if you're making 50 grand, like you don't care if the company's making money or losing money. You know what I mean? Like that's not
Yeah.
high on your list. So and a lot of times people think that they're doing really well. The company might be struggling, but they're doing really well. Or they might even think the company's doing well because whatever, I'm still getting my paycheck. We must be doing okay. You know what I mean? So so you definitely feel it as you go down. Like there's tons of adversity anytime you do a turnaround. It's just easier if the top wants you to do it. You know what I mean? You get less adversity going up, but but yeah, a lot of what I'll do is come in and talk about finances a lot more. I teach people about finances. I tell them what's wrong with our finances now and how each thing will kind of fix it and what good will look like afterwards so that we know we're heading in the right direction. And a lot of people don't like talking to their employees about that, but I tell people like, man, I'm trying to save 150 jobs here. Like we are doing things here so that we all make more money going forward. And so you guys have to understand like why we're going to stop doing this and why we're going to focus on this and then what it's going to look like at the end. And that helps get over that adversity that you'll face.
Yeah, nice. What type of mindset does it take? I mean, because you're coming in there at the lowest of lows sometimes,
Hmm.
and with people around you that are probably pretty negative.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you have to be pretty confident, and so like I'll always say my book is not for kind of the average manager. If that's where you want to be for the rest of your life, that's not who should read my book. Like if you want to try and get ahead of your peers, if you want to deliver breakthrough results, if you want to turn around a company, like that's who reads my book. And you have to be confident enough to go against the grain. Like industry orthodoxies we talk about a lot. Like a lot of the hot system is about challenging orthodoxies, and orthodoxy is things that everyone believes is true, right? So everyone believes X about this industry. You have to be willing to go in there and challenge that and then say, what if that wasn't true? What would I do differently? And I'll tell you, the easiest way to make money is to take a really boring business that's been the same way for 30 years and change it. That's the easiest way to make money. And you have to believe that you can ask those questions, get to an answer, and then implement it. And so I think the confidence factor is what it takes to go in and do that. But it's a lot easier now that it's systematized, right? And it's not just flying by the seat of my pants, but there's a system with 10 things in it that help you do it. So
yeah, what advice would you give to up and coming executives?
yeah, my favorite piece of advice is just take the dirtiest job there is. So I went into Whirlpool and I had this like small little job and I crushed it, and got no credit. I mean, it was just such a small job, like no one cared. You know what I mean? That it went well, and so I was like, man, how do you ever get ahead? And so I went to my mentor at the time, and I said, give me the dirtiest job in this company, and that's how I got into turnaround management. And I mean, he gave me a role where we were losing $175 million a year. I mean, $500,000 every time you walked in, every day you lost $500,000. And I was like, oh boy, this is way different than what and that taught me so much. And so ever since then, that's what I've done with my bosses is, and that's why I stay in turnarounds. It's just give me the dirtiest job you have. And what'll end up happening is you'll learn a ton so you get better. And then B, people pay for turnarounds, so you get paid. And then once you're good at it, there's only a handful of people that are. They're really like the amount of people I've met in my life that are good at turnarounds is not that many. So once you figure out how to do it and you can show that there's a lot of money to be made out there just going around and fixing mistakes. And that's the messed up part. Like the people you come in behind, they're not dumb. They just didn't they don't have it in them to challenge everything, to change everything, to drive all this big change in. And you have to be willing to do that to do a turnaround.
Yeah. What is the importance of neurodivergent views in the workplace?
Yeah, and that's the second reason that I decided to write the book is, I know the value of bipolar because I am successful because of it, not despite it. You know what I mean? Like the actual bipolar and hypomania is what causes me to think differently. So I know the value of it. But I sat in rooms and heard people kind of do that whole thing where it's like, well, that guy's really good. But remember a couple of years ago and that thing happened and it kind of trail off. Like no one would really say the words, but they remembered that thing that happened and he's got this issue and he's not going to be the boss because of that. and I thought to myself, like, this is not right. Like people need to understand that there are good things about people who think differently. And especially, especially nowadays where, 50% of Gen Z considers themselves neurodivergent. In my age group, that number is like 4%, right? Nobody likes to talk about it. We don't talk about it. We just get through it, grit our teeth and get through it, But nowadays, people are coming up and they have very divergent views. And this is an area of diversity that people have not focused on, right? Everyone likes talking about the other kind of diversity, and that is still important. But most of us good managers know how to deal with the other kind of diversity. Most of us good managers have no idea how to deal with neurodiversity. And if you have a person who's ADHD or bipolar or whatnot, they get scared. Managers get scared. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't. And the first thing people try and do is they try and fix you. So it's like, I didn't get the whole like, oh, you're so brave for coming out, which is what you sometimes get in the other diversity categories. You know what I mean? I got the, how can we fix you? And I'm like, you don't want to fix me, then you'll never get another turnaround again. You know what I mean? What you want to do is learn from me, learn to think like me, and then keep an eye out. And if I need your help, I'll let you know. You know what I mean? And so that was one of the other reasons I wanted to do this book, is really to start talking about how valuable neurodivergence can be, and thinking through like how, ADHD, hyperfocus, OCD, super detail oriented, bipolar, hypomanic, there's all these good things that they can bring to the table, that if you can kind of guardrail it and copy it and show other people how to do it, you can really use some of these things to your advantages. And that's what the book's about.
Awesome. Yeah, I had to look kind of up what that meant.
Yeah.
Like I heard somebody talking about that on LinkedIn one time. I'm like, what are they talking about? I just thought they were throwing some word out there, and then I'm like, oh, okay, it's just people who think differently.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And and there are plenty of people think neurodivergently and aren't mentally ill. You know what I mean? Like, but even inside of normal business, people just don't value thinking differently. They want you to stay in the box. They want you to be this whitewashed consultant viewpoint, servant leadership and all these buzzwords that they put out there. That's how they want you to manage. And I'm like, guess what? That's not how they want you to manage. What they want you to do is have breakthrough results that are twice as good as the guy who's managing like that. They don't know it yet. They'd rather have you manage this way and get breakthrough results, but that doesn't happen because you're going up against a whole bunch of other people managing the same way you are.
Yeah.
So you have to think differently to get those breakthrough results.
Yeah, that's one thing I see is a lot of people try to put you in a box and they want to try to keep you in that box, and it's like you're never going to get the lasting change you want, like staying in that box.
100%.
How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, best way is toddhagopian.com. I've got tons of free information out there. I don't sell anything except the books, so I'm not selling consulting. I put everything out there for free. Read the articles, contact me if you have questions. We'll talk, get me onto a podcast. We'll talk. I love talking about this stuff. I love teaching people, and I like it when people challenge me, and I can either defend it or alter it and get better myself. So toddhagopian.com. I'm on Twitter, Todd Hagopian. On YouTube, you can find me pretty much anywhere. I try and use my name everywhere, so it's easy to find.
Awesome. I'll put all that in the show notes too for you.
Yeah.
Is there anything we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
No, I think the only thing I would like to just do is I always try and give advice to anybody who is struggling with things that I struggled with in the past, right? You're always in the best position to help the person you once were. And so if you do have neurodivergency and you are thinking it's a weakness and you want to learn how to make it into a strength, one of the things I just tell people is make sure you're framing it that way, right? Too often people with neurodivergence or bipolar, they wait until they do something wrong, and then they blame the bipolar or they blame the ADHD. It's much, much better for you, for everybody else who has it, and for your workplace if you're giving the credit to some of the things that allow you to be different and think different, and you're talking about your disorder in positive ways. That's just going to help you, the workplace, diversity in general, and your company get a lot better. And so I just like to deliver that message, just because it's, you can choose to hide it. That's okay. But if you do choose to come out with it, like, it's just really important that you're not always using it as a crutch. There are a lot of things bad about it. It's real easy to use it as an excuse, but it's way, way more important for people to see the value in thinking differently. And bringing that to an organization really increases your value rather than the opposite.
Great advice. All right, final question. What is one piece of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with about overcoming adversity?
Yeah, I think I think the best one that we haven't touched on is probably grandiose goal setting. And one thing that I'll tell people is, under promising and over delivering, which is what everyone tells you to do, is absolutely for losers. Okay, you promise 6%, you get 8%. I promise 19%, and I only get 16%. Guess who's getting the promotion? Okay, I've given hundreds of people promotions. The guy who gets 16% is getting the promotion. So when you're thinking about adversity in the workplace, one of the things that is most easy to change is think about how to think bigger. Think about how to come up with 3-year, really aggressive goals. You can still get to kind of this under promise or reasonable 12-month goal. You know what I mean? But you have to be able to think big. Get outside your box, think big, come up with a long form strategy on how to get there, and then learn to get people onto your team. Learn to get people excited about that, and that will help you overcome all kinds of adversity. If you can get people excited about a large goal, create battles, and go after it, that's going to help you in just about every role you ever come into.
I love it. I love it. There's so many people that set their goals to me way too small. I
Yep.
love the big ones.
Yep.
Make you stretch, become a better person.
Yep. 100%.
Well, Todd, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and sharing your insight and knowledge with us.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This was a really fun conversation. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, appreciate you too. Well, guys, that's going to be all the time we have here today. Remember, the only way to get what you want is go through the fire.